Hello! In today's video, we will show you what we have been up to these past weeks. We have built a new piece of furniture, collected and pressed wildflowers in our new flower press, and spent a lot of time outside enjoying spring. We already had an idea for a sideboard in our minds, so the first step was to put the idea into paper. Once the project was ready, we printed the drawings and headed to the workshop. For this project, we chose to work with chestnut wood. We begin by selecting the best boards to use and cutting them to a more manageable size. After, we cut one edge out of each board and then we started planing, making that edge as well as the bottom and top of the boards flat. Using that same edge as a reference, we have cut the remaining live edges parallel to the first, except to the board we used for the top, where we preserved the live edge. Next, we had to glue the boards together to achieve the desired width. We've cut notches with the router and inserted some wood chips inside to make the junction sturdier. After applying the wood glue and inserting the chips, we clamped the boards together and then repeated the process for all the other boards and let it dry during the weekend. The next morning we stayed home and decided to test out our new flower press that we have built using reused wood from an old mahogany bed. And for that we collected some wildflowers from our land. In this time of the year there are so many beautiful flowers everywhere, so this was definitely the right time for that project. After collecting the flowers, we arranged them between some layers of paper and cardboard and pressed them inside the press, slightly tightening the nuts. Throughout the following weeks, we have changed the sheets of paper a couple of times and tightened the bolts a little bit every day. Back to the workshop, the glue was already dry, so we removed the clamps, and after we cut everything down to its final measurements. After cutting, we planed the wood manually to make sure everything was flat and even. Finally, we sanded everything, starting with an 80 grit sandpaper and working our way up to 220. Once everything was cut and sanded, we used the router to cut the rabbet joints that were used to assemble the main box of the side table. After, we finished the joints by hand using a chisel, and when everything was ready, we applied glue and started putting the box together. Here we neglected the camera a little bit and eventually it ran out of battery, but we still got the main part on footage. After making sure everything was square, we clamped it and finished work for that day. The next day we were removing the clamps when suddenly Bosch started barking a lot. So we went outside to check what was going on to find this snake just in front of the door. It ran away immediately, but Bosch didn't leave that spot all day long. It was time to start working on the doors. After double-checking the measurements and adding a small gap to enable the door to open and close smoothly, we cut the pieces and started working on the bridle joints. First by roughly cutting them on the table saw and then finishing them manually. After making sure they were the perfect fit, we added wood glue, clamped it and let it dry. Meanwhile, I had started working on the tapestry that was going to be used as the door panel. After working on it for an entire afternoon, I wasn't too excited about how it was coming together, so I had a different idea and wrote to the workshop to try it out. After milling some leftover wood from that same project, we cut many 2mm stripes and started playing with them. We burned them to see how it would look in black, but in the end we went with the raw look. It was still weaving, but this time not with wool, but with wood. We had a lot of scrap wood in the workshop, so that afternoon we decided to use it to make a fire and prepare a nice meal with friends, enjoying that spring evening outside. The next day, we applied the front panel to the door. Ideally, this process would be different, but because we've changed our minds halfway, this was the best alternative we could find. Meanwhile, I started working on the legs, cutting the 4 pieces to size and then cutting the desired angle. Then, using dowels and glue, we installed the legs. After the glue was dry, we removed the clamps and gave some final touches to the sideboard before applying the finish. When the wax was dry, we installed the hinges and then the door. Finally, we made a handle and installed it. As a last step, we nailed the back panel of the side table in place. That afternoon we opened the flower press. Only after 2 weeks, which is definitely not the recommended. But we wanted to frame them to display it in a crafts market we were attending that weekend. Anyway, some flowers were already pretty flat, dry and looking very beautiful. After testing some different arrangements, I glued them to the glass using double-side tape. The next day, we took the finished side table with us to the fields to take some photos and shoot a couple of videos. And this was the final result. We hope you enjoyed this video and hope to see you soon.